Welcome back to another episode of Dialed In, everyone. We are so excited today to have the wonderful Alice Hawkins here with us. Alice is a sales manager. She's done some hiring from SB Academy, also a woman in tech, and we're really excited to pick her brain today and hear everything that she has to say. Alice, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Yes, thank you. Excited to be here. I really appreciate you having me on. But yeah, like you said, my name is Alice. I'm a associate sales manager at Runwise, which is a climate tech company. Worked closely with SV Academy, hired an amazing standout rep on our team, Aaron, who I believe you had on a different episode a week or two ago. So some people might already be familiar with him, but happy to join you both and talk through, yeah, my experience, how I even found myself in sales. This was a little bit of a pivot for myself. What I look for when I'm hiring, being a woman in tech, really whatever comes up. Happy to share.
We want it
Exciting.
all.
Yeah.
Um,
I,
I'd love to kind of learn just as you mentioned, like how did you get into tech? It's always so interesting to kind of learn more of the story about how people got where they are.
yes, I feel like there are two important like pieces of my background that helped me end up where I am now. One is that I'm not an American citizen, so I came to the US as an international student, which will become relevant in a moment. And the other is that I've always been interested in a pretty wide variety of things. I think I was always the kid that was doing a little bit of everything. Like even with sport, it was multiple sports, or theater, it was multiple different types. Academics, not necessarily like standing out or driven by one thing, but trying as many different things as possible. And that carried over when I went to college. I went to Bowdoin in Maine. If you're familiar or not, it's a smaller liberal arts school. So the focus is a little bit more around having a well-rounded, like balanced education. And typically, I think a lot of people who don't know what they necessarily want to do will attend like liberal arts universities. So when I graduated in 2022, I had no idea what I wanted to do, where I wanted to be in the world, which felt a little bit overwhelming. So I moved to California, started working at a school. My parents are teachers. I thought, yep, I love education. This is going to be it for me. And surprise, it wasn't. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here speaking with you both right now. I think I still have a passion for education. I just realized that there were so many problems in the world of education that I couldn't solve in the classroom. And I just felt a little bit powerless. And I was coming in, day out, and I was really struggling to feel like I was having an impact, especially when my students were so caught up in bigger issues that they couldn't wrap their heads around in the world. Things like climate change, things like why do we have to, come to class and learn about this when there are fires right down the street from us? Just big problems that I felt powerless to really guide them through, and ultimately decided it wasn't the right fit for me. When I left that job, I put myself into a bit of a tricky position with 90 days to get a new role. Otherwise, I have to leave the country. And that was sort of the terms of my visa. I would not say that I'm a thrill seeker. So that was maybe more risk than I would usually take on. But I just had to trust that the right thing was going to come along. Had no idea what I wanted to do next, looked at marketing roles, looked at sales roles, looked at operations roles, literally threw everything out, hoping something would stick. And ultimately, sales roles were the only things that were coming back to me. So I was getting that positive feedback of, okay, there's something about my profile here that these people who are hiring for sales jobs are interested in. So then I was like, okay, if I'm going to go into sales, I need to understand what this is. Do I want this? How am I going to work for a company that I believe in? If I'm going to sell something, I want it to be something that means something to me. And that's when I really dialed down into climate tech, because I was like, if I'm going to be working in this industry, this is something that I feel like has a direct impact in the world. I want to sell something I feel good about. And that's how I came across Runwise. And I pretty much just decided that if the world was telling me to go in this direction, I might as well listen to it. and sales was going to be something that could set me up in whatever career I ended up down the line, which I think it just goes to show you don't have to necessarily know you want to be a salesperson to end up here. And I don't know that I'll be a salesperson or a sales manager forever, but for now, I'm developing skills that I need to be successful in my future career path. That was a long time, but hopefully you took something from it.
No, that was awesome. I love in particular just like the trust in, well, I'm gonna take that risk. I'm up for the challenge, which is definitely something that we know managers are looking for in folks coming into a sales role, like not afraid of a challenge. And I love that you just took that leap of faith when so many people probably would be too nervous to do so. I also really appreciate, the context and the coming back to, I wanted to make sure I had that impact in aligning your, climate change passion with a role that just, you, as you said, kind of kept hitting you in the face. Well, this is where I seem to be a match. I'm curious now that you're in the role at Runwise and you've blended the climate change and the sales kind of skills, what does impact look like or feel like for you on a daily basis in this role today?
That's a that's a big question. I think impact some days feels a little bit more vague than other days. I know always that I feel good about what I'm working towards here at Runwise. It's tangible, it's there, it is hardware and it is software and it exists to help decarbonize buildings. It's not, a vague AI platform, which is not to say that those sorts of systems don't also have a place in the world. I think for me, it just helps me really wrap my head around like the literal impact that we are having. Like I can look up on our dashboard every single building that we've installed Runwise in, and I can see, okay, these are the buildings that I sourced. This is how many metric tons of CO2 I've helped, reduce. This is how much I've saved them. So I think that impact exists for me. And then I think the impact as well of just managing a team and working with the team on a day-to-day basis is something that I find really fulfilling. I was getting to the point when I was an SDR of just needing something a little bit more to keep me going. And I think as you move through your career, it's important to find new motivators because eventually you're going to get bored. And for me, that was really being involved in the development of my teammates. And that started before I was promoted, which I think is how I found myself in this role, was just really deciding that when somebody new starts, just to share what's worked for me, because we're a team, we're working towards a shared goal. And yes, I want to be the best on the team, like we all do, but we're motivated, competitive people. That's why we're in these positions. But that doesn't mean I can't help other people be successful too. And from there, now moving into a management role, like I get to do that and I have to do that. And it's my responsibility to do that. So I'm really motivated about okay, who have I trained that's going to get promoted? Who had a really bad month and is now able to overcome that and have a great month? Who was unmotivated yesterday and is now really motivated today? Who is taking my advice? Who is disagrees with my advice but has a better idea? I think those are little pieces of impact that keep me going every day.
When you talk about the transition into sales, what surprised you when you started out in the industry? And you mentioned being a woman in the business, so I'd love if you could touch on maybe how that impacted that side too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few things there. I'll say that I'm really, really lucky to work at a company where there are so many female role models, both specifically on the sales team and off of the sales team. And that's one of the reasons partially why I wanted to work here. Just because I knew intrinsically that's what I was going to need to be successful, is to have these female role models. So I'm very lucky to have that. And now I'm lucky to be a part of that, and to be able to play a role in shaping who now joins the company. So I think that surprised me, actually, that I was able to join a company that already had these values in place. I interviewed at a lot of other programs where they really pushed me on, yeah, you'd be our first female hire. Like, how do you feel about that? And like my rote response was always just, yeah, I'd be happy. Like, we've got to start somewhere, and I'm competitive, and I would love to come in and like show everyone else that it doesn't matter, that I can be just as good. It definitely would drive me, I think, if I was going to be the only woman on a sales team, but I really value that I don't have to be. So I think that it's important that I can just help others get into positions where they feel part of that, especially the industry we work in, real estate, property management, boiler controls. It's also traditionally very male. So I do see the people that I work with struggle with that. And I think the dynamics on the phones are pretty different. I can circle back to that a little more later, but I think with sales in general, I was pretty prepared coming into it, honestly. Like, I knew it was going to be hard. I knew it was going to be out of my comfort zone, but that's what I wanted. Jane, you were talking about like the why. Heather as well, you touched on it. Like, that was my why. Like, yes, I was competitive. Yes, I was motivated, but I also knew that the things that hold me back as a person are a fear of failure, a fear of rejection. And I talked about that in my interview process. I wanted a job that was going to push me to not be so afraid of those things, because whatever I end up doing, if I want to start my own company, if I want to solve the problems in education that I believe that exist, I'm not going to be able to have those things hold me back and still be successful. So I knew that those things were going to be there. I think you can only prepare yourself so much. And now it's my responsibility to help other people that join my team move through the stages that I've seen happen time and time again of like, okay, how are you feeling when you're 2 weeks in? How are you feeling when you're 1 month in? How are you feeling when you're 5 months in? Because there's only so much prep that you can do to go through those phases, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes complete sense. I love that you touched on the idea of fear as a driver. I think so many people, that's going to resonate so much, whether like it's a fear of, okay, I'm going to take this leap and trust myself. It's a fear of, this is the leap I want to take, but it's, other things holding me back. And I really just kudos to you for saying in the interviews, here's what I need in a future role. And I don't want to let this hold me back, that fear of failure or fear of rejection, etc.
And I'm sure that turned a lot of companies away from me as well, but it led me towards a right fit. And I hire people who astound me with how just like unafraid they are and how different they are in their approach. And they don't have those factors holding them back. But I think that's a testament to you can be successful in sales if you decide to put your mind to it, regardless of what you feel like is a struggle.
I really love that you touched on, being authentic in the interview process may have turned some employers off potentially.
Yeah.
It wasn't what I was looking for. And I think that shows a lot of awareness on your part and bravery on your part. And Heather Lynn, she and I are coaches by trade, and we often talk to people about you have to show up authentically to these interviews. It is almost like a first date. Like you both have to make sure that chemistry is there, that fit is there on both sides. On that same idea, you are now in the position where you yourself are making those choices and thinking about who's going to be a great fit for my team, etc. Curious to share with listeners who probably a lot of whom are going to be those job seekers. As a hiring manager for an SDR team, what do you look for in a candidate coming forward?
Yes, good question. You actually touched on something major that I look for in the interview process, which is actually the ability to mirror the energy that I'm putting into the interview. I can pretty much tell almost straight away if someone is telling me things that they think that I want to hear, and if they're so stuck in their mindset around what they think an interview process should be like, that they can't adapt to how I want to run the interview, which for me personally, and again, I can't speak for every hiring manager, but for me, it's extremely conversational. Like, it's important to me as someone who is early in my career to demonstrate in the interview my management style. So I am not going to grill you with a bunch of questions back to back. I really want to see how you can converse with me, how you can sell yourself as an interesting, engaging person. And a lot of people that are able to do that end up moving forward in the interview process, but a lot of people aren't able to wrap their head around the energy that I'm giving. They're not able to mirror that. And then they're stuck in, what I can tell are rehearsed answers around what they think I want to hear around competition. I mean, like, yes, I'm looking for all of the same things that every other company is looking for: being competitive, being a good communicator, drive. Why do you want to be an SDR? Why do you want to be an SDR at this company? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? None of that is new or interesting, but really being able to pivot and have thoughtful answers that tie into who you are as a person, our company, and what I'm actually asking you in the moment, I think is a really important differentiator for me personally.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You touched on like a lot of themes throughout the conversation so far of just like common culture themes that we see as maybe sometimes they're a stereotype, maybe they don't like they live up to the name in various organizations. But there was one moment where you said like, yeah, that might be the way, but it doesn't have to be. And it sounds like that's kind of the approach that you have. And I so appreciate in a lot of different areas, whether it means being a woman in tech, whether it means being a hiring manager that looks for some more nuances that a lot of people may ignore. And also just in how you approach the interview process yourself of being like, I may have certain things I should be telling you right now, but it doesn't mean I have to. And it's
Yeah.
ended up setting yourself up to be in a position where you can thrive even more. And also at the same time, like create that ripple effect at the organization you did find yourself at.
Yeah, and I think that ties into as well something else that's important to me, which is like I always leave half of the interview for them to grill me, because inherently being an SDR, it's such a hard job, right? It is so hard. And sales is hard, being an SDR is hard. I want to hire people that are going to grow, they're going to be successful, but they're also going to last and be happy. And I think for that to be the case, they have to be interviewing me as much as I'm interviewing them. So when I give that space and someone's not prepared or excited or even that invested in asking me questions about things that should matter to them, it's always a little bit of a red flag, because I'm like, you should want to know what my management style is. You should want to speak to other people on my team. You should want to know about progression opportunities. You should want to know our culture. How competitive are we? Like, what room for growth is there? I think that's really important to me as well. It's just like, I want you to be happy here. And I'll always introduce my background, because it's totally fair that some people are not going to want to be managed by someone who had 5 months of SDR experience, was promoted, and has now been a manager for 6 months. So I'm always candid, like it's okay to not want that. There are things that I can offer. 20 years of sales experience is not one of them. And when people are caught off guard by that, I always worry a little. Like, you've got to think about what you want in order to be successful as an SDR long term.
100%. Also, Jane and I's number one, like underrated red flag is if an interviewee comes to the table and doesn't have any questions.
As a hiring manager, especially for someone in sales, do you prioritize a conversational interview? It's because as an SDR, you need to be able to hold a conversation. You need to be able to lead the conversation. Why do you prioritize them coming to the table with thoughtful, why-based questions? It's because that's going to be a skill you need to showcase
Yeah.
day out in the role. So, yeah, I just wanted to highlight that the why behind different approaches and why, interviews are formatted in a certain way. I think people go in with this formulaic of they're going to ask me 10 questions. I need to have three and then we're done. Like
Yeah.
you need to come back to what is the bigger picture here. And I think people lose that as they go through the grueling interview process.
Yeah, and for us, like partially because it's our culture here, partially because we're a startup, like we don't do a mock cold call through any phase of the interview. And I know a lot of other companies will. like to us, that's like we can train you. It's meant to be an entry level role or a pivot based role. I will help you. We will give you a script. That's not the foundation of what we're looking for, is for someone to be able to like pretend that they're calling a property manager about boiler controls. So I think it's just about as well like where companies place their priority and what they're looking for. If it's an entry level role, like you should not be able to do that before, or you can, but you don't have to be able to do it in order to get a job. And then I think that ties back into what type of organization are you looking for? Because we're not going to do that as part of the interview process. So is that the environment you're looking for? Like a startup, it's a little bit more scrappy. There's opportunity to shape things, to like create your own role and pathway to success here? Or are you looking for a job in a company where they will test you on your cold call style and ability and then move you forward through that, and you're looking for more like rigidity, structure, and like a larger team and processes to help you be successful? There's no right answer. Like we do it this way, they do it the other way. But again, that comes back to like, what are you looking for as a candidate?
And so I always am curious because like I think so often in this industry, like we talk a lot about, and I guess I mean like in the interviewing, hiring industry, we talk so much about things um that we want people to do and that we recommend, that we look for. But I think sometimes people also need to hear like what should they not do? Like what is something that's like getting in their way? And so either in your own experience or in the experience that you've had as someone who's on the interviewing side, what have you found to be like, please don't do that? That's preventing you.
That's a good question. What I will say before I answer that question, since I don't want to lose my thought when you're talking about competency-based hiring, I think that ties into like why what SV Academy is doing is really interesting, because like I'll speak to Aaron as an example. Like met him for 15 minutes, chatted, had a good conversation, and then like welcome him into our team, and he's one of our top performers here. And I think that just goes to show that if you can find fit and then give someone an opportunity to like grow, learn the skills, apply the skills based on certain traits that they portray, like they can be really successul. That was not your question, but I felt like it was necessary to say.
We appreciate that. Yeah.
It was nice to hear.
But back to the question about don'ts as opposed to do's, I would say, and this is a little bit personal, I see a lot of people flounder when they feel like they don't get the right answer, especially if we're pushing on research-based questions or sales psychology questions. What we're really looking for in those moments, and this goes back to like the base why we were talking about, is someone's ability to think on the spot and come up with a compelling, engaging answer, even if it's not the right one. And so a don't is definitely like the panic and the stress around realizing you've been caught out. There's two do's in that situation. It's like either you can admit that you don't know and try and find the right answer with us, where we work together in the interview environment as a team, or just like commit, and sell your answer and do your best in the moment, because we're not expecting you to know everything. And in sales, like there are still so many things I get wrong on the phone all of the time about like my pitch. I still like can't properly articulate the differences between certain types of heating systems, and it's hard. But if you can be engaging and personable and ask good questions, like you can still book a meeting. So I think for me, that's a really big don't, is just the panic and the anxiety around, especially if it's in a final round, like you got there because you deserve to be there. You did the hard work, have the belief, have the self-trust, and work with us and together, to like figure out what the answer is. And if the interview environment isn't fostering that kind of culture, I mean, it's just me, but I probably wouldn't want to work there.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I love that our conversation today keeps coming back to like mindset and culture and fit. I think these are topics and areas that so often get lost as we are talking to candidates, or candidates are thinking about next moves, etc. So I appreciate that we we keep coming back to it because they are important and probably some of the most important things.
Yeah.
As our final question, we told you we were going to ask a food-related question. You and I were talking about travel a little bit before we actually hit record here. So curious, plain food, yes or no?
Oh, that's a good question. That's tough. I feel like I'm a no generally, except for when they bring around those really warm, fluffy buttered rolls. I'll eat the buttered rolls on like some of the long distance flights, but otherwise, I just want my snacks, my overpriced, indulgent airport snacks that I wouldn't usually be eating. Yeah, I think I'm a snacker on a flight. It keeps you entertained for longer. If you just get full on one meal, then you've got, I don't know, 4 other hours to be bored and not be eating anything. So a snacker.
I love that
What
answer.
about you?
Yeah, Heather, I'm curious. I'll share my answer, but what do you think?
I think that's hilarious. Your answer, to be honest, makes me think of like how I use snacks as like a distraction for my 2-year-old on flights, where I'm like, this is gonna entertain you longer, and I'll like put it in
Yeah.
a little tackle box. Anyways, okay. Um, I'm a no, except for when my first flight, which happens too often, my first flight's delayed. I have no time in between my connection, and I'm starving. So I'm like, okay, sure. And it's always kind of like the charcuterie boxes or something like that. But otherwise, no. I want the like $7 bag of Starburst that I paid
Yeah.
for, or my like $10 water.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's like the only time where you're like, okay, I will pay $20 for something I could get at a gas station. Sure.
Yeah.
Completely agree with you both. Unless I'm starving, yeah, it's definitely a no for me. But I have my snack staples that like I don't purchase anywhere else, but if I'm going to the airport, I'm gonna get this particular type of candy and like it's gonna be in my bag for my flight wherever I'm going. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Alice. It's been wonderful to learn from you and chat with you. And we're so grateful that you are part of the SV community. It's been amazing working with Runwise, and you have so many beautiful nuggets to share. And we align so wonderfully on a lot of your approach to just the industry and also into like helping find talent and nurture talent.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Hopefully, some of my rambles made sense. In sales, we can talk. That is what we do. We're a chatty bunch. But yeah, no, thank you so much for making the time, and I'm grateful to be a part of the community as well.
Oh, awesome. We will definitely invite you back. We know you've got lots more to share.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jane.
Awesome.